We all know Sun Tzu is one of the best commanders in Rise of Kingdoms, and I don't think I need to prove that to you anymore. But what I do want to prove to you is a little secret about the rage generation on Sun Tzu and the talent implications and pairing implications that I don't see anybody talking about. In fact, weirdly enough, this secret applies to Pelagius as well. So stick around in this video if you're an experienced player to get a better understanding of how to use commanders that generate rage, and if you're newer to the game, I am going to give you some very practical pairings where Sun Tzu can really shine. Now, before I tell you about this secret, I also want to tell you about the sponsor of this video, and that is Kingdom Maker. Welcome to Kingdom Maker, a free-to-play game on iOS and Android that combines real-time strategy, role-playing, and simulation gameplay to make a immersive, massively multiplayer medieval fantasy world in which you grow your family quite literally and get to customize the skills that are on your offspring. Your nobles are your avatars for social gameplay, researching, trading, combat, and going to war. And of course, getting a little romantic is how you make more of your nobles. In this game, it's got a Total War-esque combat with very customizable armies. You can spectate any battle in real time or join in the fun on any side you please. And it's got a very fun tone that doesn't take itself too seriously. There's a lot of medieval fantasy tropes with a solid dose of wit and whimsy, and occasionally even breaking the fourth wall. Kingdom Maker really has a unique, fresh look at the medieval war fantasy game genre and a lot of humor to it. If you want to play the game, download using the link in the description or the QR code on the screen. This is free to play on iOS and Android. And thank you again to Kingdom Maker for sponsoring this video. Today we're talking all about Sun Tzu's secret, which has everything to do with rage generation. And if you're newer to the game, rage generation is what determines when you use your active skills. Those things that have the most impact on how a battle is going to go. It's the sort of premium skill on the commander that only gets used on the turn after you hit the rage requirement for that skill. And courtesy of Wick Gaming, he did a ton of research proving how much rage you generate per turn, and I want to talk about the implications of that very important fact, and also the implications of something called rage capping on a commander like Sun Tzu and Pelagius, because this will actually influence players using these commanders quite significantly. So allow me to take a moment to explain rage. And hey, use the timestamps in the description if you're like all familiar with this stuff and want to jump right to the implications and the talents and the pairings. You can do that. Use the timestamps. But first, let me explain how rage works for those that want to understand the game better. On any one turn, and this is an oversimplification for the purpose of this video, you will generate about 120 rage. That's the damage you're taking from people hitting you, and also the damage you're dealing back to other stuff. By the way, the more things that hit you, the more rage you will generate, for what it's worth. Now, that's still, though, base about 120 rage per turn if you're just fighting one thing. But what was really surprising is that on any one turn, the maximum amount of rage that you can actually generate is 220. There is a limit. It doesn't matter if you would have generated 600. The most you actually get is 220. Now, wait a minute. Sun Tzu on his active skill, he can hit 5 targets, bro, and generates 50 rage per target. You mean to tell me that the majority of that rage is just wasted? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. It does literally nothing for you. Actually nothing. So this is sort of weird. Only hitting up to really just 2 targets does anything of value for you. And weirdly enough, I mean, obviously the damage is good, but the rage gen does nothing. And what's weird still is that the way that rage reduction effects work make it so that overraging does nothing beneficial for you either. The way that rage reduction effects work, like on a commander, by the way, very, very strong commander, Nebu over here, he has a chance to reduce your rage by 100. Well, if you're unlucky and you're fighting an opponent that does this, it will make it so that if you would have generated 220 rage on a turn, now you will only generate 120. It reduces the rage that you generate by 100. And even if you would have pulled down 600 rage in a turn, you'd think, whoa, I overraged, but he reduced it by 100. I should still get to 220, but that's not how it works. You get all the benefit of rage generation effects, and then they cap that at 220, and then they do rage reduction effects, which makes rage reduction really, really powerful. But that's not the topic of this video. All that to say, the extra rage you're generating from Sun Tzu when he uses his active skill might not do very much for you, especially if you have talents and other things generating rage for you. So, an example of talents includes Rejuvenate. It includes Feral Nature, although I'm less worried about Feral Nature because this could happen on any turn. Rejuvenate, you may recall, happens when your active skills are used. I'm going to show you more of that in a second. There are also commanders like Joan of Arc that generates lots of rage, or Trajan or William if you're further along into the game. There's also really powerful accessories if you're further along into the game that generate rage, like the Horn of Fury and also Korok War Drums. There are even skills on other commanders, by the way, that generate rage. But I want to hone in very closely here on Sun Tzu and what this means for you, because if on Sun Tzu's turn, you don't really need Rejuvenate, because if you hit 2 targets, you're going to hit the rage cap anyways, does that mean that you can free up those talent points? And what are the implications for the commanders that you ultimately should pair with? This is where things get really interesting, because there are commanders where generating rage has a bigger impact, because weirdly enough, the majority of commanders in the game have access to the Rejuvenate talent, but some very premium commanders do not. I want to start first with an early game commander. I want to talk about Eulji Mundok. You see, Eulji Mundok doesn't actually have a way to generate rage from his talents, and that is infantry and attack. That is really interesting because the rage from Sun Tzu is very strong in that case. Sure, it only works on Sun Tzu's turn. In other words, normally what happens, and let me just show this to you in a log. I actually saved one for this purpose. When you have 2 commanders and you have the Rejuvenate talent, if we look in the battle log, what you normally have happen is when one active skill is used, you have Rejuvenate trigger. Now, in this case, Boudica also has an ability that generates rage. That's Celtic Blood. That's her 3rd skill. In this instance, she's not really overraging, at least not by very much, if at all, because you've got the base of about 120 and then an extra 110 on top of that. Okay, cool. Very close to the rage cap, but not so much rage that you're really wasting a lot of it. And then there's a turn of downtime, because Boudica was the primary. Turn of downtime. Then your secondary commander uses their active skill. In this case, I had Sun Tzu, right? So Sun Tzu only hit 1 target here. And if you're only hitting 1 target, I mean, first of all, where are you open field fighting? There's only 1 target, but whatever. Boudica generates or gets the 50 rage, and that comes just from the active skill generating rage. And then boom, Rejuvenate generates more rage. Now, if we had hit more targets here, by the way, it would have been 100 rage or 150 rage or up to 250 rage, which would have made Rejuvenate 100% worthless in this instance. So a commander that doesn't have a talent like Rejuvenate and instead has really powerful talents like you get in the attack tree, by the way, specifically for prolonged battles. Oh man, Effortless is so good. Now you start to see a disproportionate benefit to having a commander like Sun Tzu, because you're actually getting the benefit of the rage production on his active skill. But there's another commander, by the way, like Eulji Mundok, that has the attack and infantry tree. And that is an extremely premium commander that you're probably familiar with because you're thinking about investing in him down the road, and that is Alexander the Great, where I would recommend a build that looks like this. And if you were using Sun Tzu as a secondary, which, by the way, I did for a long time, taking advantage of Sun Tzu's secret, the fact that he generates rage and Alexander the Great doesn't have a rage generation engine tied to your active skills, this is a really, really great combo. So if you were in the early game, I would be looking to those commander pairings to really take advantage of Sun Tzu as a commander. And the thing that I also really like about this pairing is the fact that Sun Tzu cares a lot also about dealing skill damage. Alexander the Great deals skill damage. Eulji Mundok deals skill damage. But there are 2 other very common pairs with Sun Tzu that I want to talk about for just a second. And a part of the reason these combos work as well as they do is because these commanders also lack the rage engine in the early game. And that includes commanders like Charles Martel, who I scrolled right past, and also Richard I. These commanders don't generate a lot of rage when you use an active skill, which means you get nearly the full benefit of Sun Tzu generating lots of rage. And even though neither Richard I nor Charles Martel does skill damage, making your fourth skill really only benefit Sun Tzu. The cool part about this combination is that these commanders love getting more rage. They just don't have ways to do it. And so Sun Tzu works really well as a pair there. Not only are you hiding an epic behind a legendary, which is generally a strong way to deploy your epics and make you a little bit less of a target, but also you get the full benefit of all that extra rage generation. Now, if you were to use a commander that has Rejuvenate as a talent as the primary, should you pick up that talent? And this is where I want to show you a couple creative builds here that might be better. This is a classic build that you might see on Sun Tzu in the open field. It's a great build, but I will point out that Rejuvenate on the turn where Sun Tzu does his active skill is wasted if you are hitting at least 2 targets. So is there a way to deploy those talent points in a way that is beneficial to you, where maybe you get more value? And the answer is, actually, I think there is. If you go and you just shift those points from being over here to being down there, now you're picking up 6% of march speed, which is really good, and also 6% skill damage after you use an active skill. This means that when your primary commander does an active skill, your secondary commander will definitely get the benefit of this because there's a second of downtime, then they use their active skill. And as long as your primary commander uses their skill again within 6 seconds of your secondary commander using their active skill. In other words, primary commander uses their skill, second of downtime, secondary commander uses their active skill. As long as your primary commander fires again in the next 6 seconds, you get the benefit of the extra skill damage. So for a fight that runs on for a while, you will fully get 6% extra skill damage on all those active skills you're using, which seems really good. So I think this is an interesting build. You miss out potentially on 60 rage on the turn where the other commander, the not Sun Tzu commander, would have used their active skill. And you gain 6% skill damage. And this only gets better, by the way, when you have more sources of skill damage. The more ways you can deal skill damage, the better. On a commander like CPO, for example, right? The more ways you deal skill damage. By the way, this is new CPO, legendary CPO. This is endgame stuff, but whatever. The more ways you have to deal the skill damage, the better this is, because this does not just apply to active skills. It just triggers from active skills. All sources of skill damage get the benefit here. Now, there is another commander where this is all just very relevant advice, and that is Pelagius. Of all commanders, he generates 100 rage. So if Pelagius generates 100 rage for you, Rejuvenate is wasted on the turn where he used his active skill. So a common early game pairing is Minamoto with Pelagius. So even on Minamoto, should you consider, by the way, a build that doesn't have Rejuvenate for the open field at least? I mean, to give you an example of what that build would look like, you'd go all the way up here to Rallying Cry, you'd get the extra rage from Undying Fury, you snap all the way down to get Clarity, and then boom, drop a few points into Burning Blood, and I've got 4 points of flex here if I really wanted. There's a couple places I could go with that. I'd drop 1 over here to get the extra march speed, and then maybe 3 points over here, as an example, to get some extra march speed when I'm hitting something. This is an interesting option if you were pairing with Pelagius, because what are you missing out on? 60 rage on one turn. Is 60 rage on one turn worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 talent points? I understand you get a couple stats along the way there, but I'm just trying to point out that for commanders that generate rage, Rejuvenate might not be such a necessary talent. And by the way, for those of you that didn't know this, on support commanders specifically, like say you're using Joan of Arc in Canyon, you really only need 2 points on Rejuvenate over here if you weren't going all the way up for Cage of Thorns, because you're just going to overrage. So support tree rejuvenate is just like really weird. Unless you're going all the way up here to get Cage of Thorns, and if you're using Ethelfled, having extra slows is really good because she does more damage when things are slowed. But otherwise, you're kind of wasting points, weirdly enough. One other early game Cav pair combo that I just want to highlight is to use a commander that doesn't generate rage, and by the way, that's Belisarius, and pair with Pelagius. And if you're at the start of the game and you're running around in a Mightiest Governor smashing gatherers, you're not going to make any friends, but it is actually going to be a really good combination because you're going to get the healing from Pelagius, you're going to get the rage from Pelagius, the really good Cav stats, and you can use mobility talents from Belisarius to hop very quickly from resource node to resource node and escape combat when you need to. Now, if you stuck around for this long in the video, I want to commend you for making it through one of the more technical videos that I've made about the mechanics of Rise of Kingdoms and the way that rage works. And if you're a more advanced player, keep in mind that all of this guidance will be super relevant to you whenever they release new commanders into the game that generate rage, because you'll have to ask, hey, for my situation, am I actually getting the benefit of Rejuvenate, or should I consider something else? If you learned something new in this video, throw a like on here and consider subscribing. Check out the sponsor. The link is in the description for Kingdom Maker. I appreciate their sponsoring this video, and I think you'll enjoy playing that game. And until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom, and if there's any other rage secrets that we should talk about in a video, definitely let me know in the comments.